Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 360, recorded Monday, July 28th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, and it's available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, including a video version on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're listening. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is a summer-ready Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, yeah, we've been talking about what's in the calendar, some of which is summer activity, some of which is video game releases. If you're interested in any of that, you can check out the Render Distance, that's the extended version of the Spawn Chunks podcast. You can get access to that by becoming a patron, supporting us over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Patrons get access to other things as well, including monthly hangouts where you get to let us know what you've been up to in Minecraft that month. We had one of those just this weekend, and that should be going up in the Patreon RSS feed very soon. So keep an eye out for that if you're already supporting the show, and if you're not, once again, patreon.com/thespawnchunks. On today's show, a surprising new feature has shaped the next gameplay drop into potentially a drop all about inventory management. We'll be talking about the shelf a little bit later on in today's discussion, and frankly, I could not be more excited.
I am looking forward to the shelf as well. It's kind of hard not to talk about it at the top of the show, but to kick things off, what have you been doing in Minecraft this week?
Well, this week, as you might expect, I dipped into the Bedrock Preview to check that stuff out. So my activity in other regions of my Minecraft life has been relatively minimal. I did a bit more terraforming on the Survival Guide world, but it's still in the early stages, so I don't really have a whole lot to show for it. It just sort of looks like a slightly smoother version of a Minecraft landscape right now, but I'm still terraforming around the Windy City, trying to smooth out some of the bumpier terrain around there and make sure that everything slopes down gently towards a harbor that I might end up building, and that kind of thing. So scope creep is hitting that area pretty hard, but I'm looking forward to tackling that as we go on. On Misadventures, I have something that doesn't involve building much at all. It involves crafting instead. Having been guided into the new Infernal Descent dungeon last week by Whip and Shovel, I've now explored the quest that teaches you how to access it. So the admins have got an NPC that lives out in a house somewhere, and if you explore their house, look in some of the barrels, you find written books of like journals and notes that they've kept and that kind of thing. And if you do a couple of quests for the NPC, they give you access to their basement, which contains more of their notes for how to craft this infernal elixir. That they got a giant fireplace built in this house, and if you drink the infernal elixir before stepping into the fireplace, the fire doesn't harm you, and you can go through to the dungeon. So you effectively have to do a little quest before you can even access this place, sort of like crafting something up before you attempt like a World of Warcraft dungeon or something like that. And so I've been working on getting the supplies for that. It involves some fairly grindy stuff. You have to get powder snow and fire coral and things like that. So I did a lot of exploring in the resource world to make sure that I had enough materials to craft that for at least a few attempts at the dungeon. And this week I'll probably be taking a few of my server mates in who haven't already had a chance to check out the dungeon themselves. So watch this space, because my first run of Infernal Descent is going to be up on YouTube this week. I finally managed to publish a video about the stuff I've been building on Misadventures and the quest for the Skeletal Wolf finally concluding. So I'm enjoying my time on Misadventures right now and hoping I can get some more collab action in a bit later.
Nice. I mean, it's cool to have such great interactivity on a server, right? Like I feel like Citadel has turned into kind of like Hermitcraft, where people tend to be very off in their own spaces doing their own thing, and everybody's a busy adult. And I think I'm the only person that streams right now, and certainly the only person that streams like as a job on the servers. So I play a lot more, and so I don't seem to interact with other server mates as often. But it's cool that you've got that, like the quests. I like the idea of adding these things into Minecraft for these dungeons and these cool experiences for players, but then also not relying on like the Discord chat for the server to tell people how to go and do it, right? Like it's in the game. Like you've got an NPC, so then it becomes a lot easier for you as content creators to explain to your audience what's happening, because they can kind of experience with you as like a playthrough, as opposed to having you to do like just a monologue explaining what is happening and how it's all set up right behind the scenes. It seems a lot more game forward, I guess.
Yeah, it's more organic, the sort of exploration aspect of it. And
that's a good word for it, yeah.
Everybody else on the server has also been very polite about spoiler tagging discussion of it in the Discord. So, like, I didn't know what the ingredients for this quest were until I actually went in there and took a look at it. So yeah, and everyone in my chat on Twitch was also very kindly not spoiling things for me. And I'd said several times, like, I want to actually approach this like I'm doing the quest for the first time and seeing if I can puzzle my way through it and figure it out. And yeah, it came together really well. It's a delight to be on a server where the admins are putting stuff in like that pretty regularly and shaping experiences, because that's something I think a lot of people would like for vanilla Minecraft a little bit more, is stuff like trial chambers and whatnot popping up, and every time it's something new and different. But since Minecraft vanilla develops at the rate that it does, and a lot of that stuff is meant to be player-led activity, in a single-player world, you never really get surprised by anything if you know the game well enough. Whereas in this multiplayer experience, not only are new builds popping up that my server mates are crafting constantly, but the admins occasionally just drop this huge bombshell, and more often than not, that gives us access to new resources as well. Like, this is the first time we have access to some of the nether stuff that you can normally only get from nether fortresses, like nether wart, blaze powder, blaze rods. We can actually craft potions for the first time. So we have access to brewing now, we have access to ender chests now. There's just like occasional things that almost drop like quality of life updates for those of us who are so used to just going out and getting everything that makes us comfortable. But yeah, that's what I've been doing this week, and will probably be what I continue to do this upcoming week as I delve further into misadventures. How about you, Joel? What's new on the Citadel?
So I've been up to my eyeballs in 2 high grass and 2 high ferns as the landscaping of the west banks of the Spruce River has continued. I would say I'm about halfway done in terms of the landscape I have to cover. I still have a couple of very large cliffs to hit, and they tend to take a little bit longer. And I kind of skipped over that waterfall that I was having trouble with last week, and will need to return to it. So that's going to be probably another stream's worth of content that I have to do. So as a result, I was gunning to try to finish Westhill in July, but that's not happening. There's also a bunch of things happening around the studio that means I'm not going to be able to stream every day this week. So I'm just going to be plugging away as usual. But it does mean I feel like I can confidently say that I will be wrapping up Westhill in August, because I can't see it taking a month to finish this landscaping and then do the distillery under the keep. Like that's the only things that are left. And so I'm excited about it. So I'm playing on the Citadel exclusively when I stream, except for the Lego stuff on Fridays. And so a lot of this has just been like resculpting the landscape with a couple of simple rules, trying to keep it in 1 block steps close to the edge of the river. And then if it gets steep, quickly changing to 2 block high steps, which when you cover that with 2 high grass and 2 high ferns and the odd tree or the odd bush, it really does cover the landscape quite well. And the challenge I've found has been the sea of minty green that is the taiga biome. And surprisingly, just the odd spruce tree will do a lot. You don't have to blanket the cliff in trees, but peppering in a couple of extra trees, pulling that natural tree line that Minecraft gives you down a little bit closer to the water really does help. Especially if you can add like a custom route, like, or throw in an extra branch, or I like using fence gates, especially from a distance. If you put them on the side of a tree underneath the leaf blocks, it looks like a little bit of a branch. It differentiates it from other trees. It starts to look less like a stamp, of a tree just being repeated across the landscape. And I've learned how to make some pretty quick custom spruce trees, which is nice. But mostly my strategy has been to position myself on the ground somewhere on one of the builds or near one of the builds, like a path that goes behind a house or a path that goes along the river on the east bank, and kind of look at the west bank and say, okay, well, what's the key point here? Like, it's probably the closest thing to me. So it's probably like the bend in the river on the other side, or maybe it's a cliff on the other side, or maybe it's a reverse. So instead of a bend coming towards you, maybe it's a bend that kind of goes away from you. And that would be a good spot to put like some denser foliage, like some sugar cane for reeds and things like that. And so I'm peppering these little handmade, handcrafted bits of foliage, which are small. They're only like 6 blocks long, something like that. And then in between, I'm just hitting everything with bone meal. My process has been to pepper an empty hillside with ferns, not like every other block, but like every 3 to 4. And then going through and just bone mealing everything, removing any flowers that pop up. Weirdly, you get a lot of dandelions and poppies in taiga forests, and they're odd pops of color. You can see them from a mile away. So I tend to get rid of them. But in doing so, I just it covers up most of the dirt. you very quickly see a spot where you might have had like a 3 block high step, and you'll see the side of a dirt block, and you can go in, remove that, and adjust it. And it's not hard. It's just time consuming. And even the process is not so much time consuming. It's the back and forth. It's the navigating where you are, walking through too tall grass. It's kind of hard on the eyes. So I haven't really been able to stream for more than like 2 hours and a bit, because after a while, I just feel like I can't see what I'm doing. And even though I'm happy with the result, it feels like a frustrating process. It's like one of those things that it's not necessarily fun as a Minecraft player, but when you stand back and look at the results, you're like, I am very happy with this. So like you can continue to do it, but you're just like, it's kind of rough at the same time.
Yeah, I can imagine it getting sort of fatiguing putting all of that grass down, and you're sort of looking at TV static after a while. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, going back to your point about the trees as well, I think the trees are really interesting. In Minecraft, a lot of the time, the game decides where to place trees based on proximity of other solid blocks and whether it's going to have like leaves colliding with the terrain and that kind of stuff. And so often Minecraft won't generate trees in certain areas. And you compare that to real life where trees are going to seek out water sometimes, and like, you know, trees will be able to thrive alongside a riverbank where there's a constant flow of fresh water and the roots can kind of drink from the river. So you end up with a situation in Minecraft where the landscape doesn't even look that realistic 100% of the time. And in real life, if you adopt that approach in Minecraft, like trees will just go anywhere. And so a lot of the time, it makes more sense to bring those trees further down if you can do custom stuff, or if you can force a sapling to grow and maybe like shape the landscape closer to it again. It can feel a lot better in that circumstance than if you let the natural Minecraft terrain do its thing and just adapt that slightly by growing the grass everywhere. So I think it's a smart move to bring some of the trees down to the waterline like that, because that just feels a lot more realistic for the area.
Yeah, thanks. I think so too. And it is challenging with especially the earlier saplings like the spruce saplings, because those ones all have different like ratios as to what they're looking for space, for growth and things like that, especially the ones like uh dark oak and spruce that you can combine into two thick trees.
Yeah.
So what I've done in a lot of cases, and especially if it's okay that I want a taller tree, I'll put the log where I want the tree to go, put a grass block on top of that, put a sapling there, grow the new tree, remove the grass block, replace it with a log. And so you've just kind of like grown a Minecraft tree in the air, and then it kind of like pulled the trunk down. And I do that a lot as I landscape, because sometimes the trees, they end up that like they're on the edge of a cliff. And so rather than having them go into a dirt block that's just kind of showing the edge, I just dig that dirt down until it hits a point where there's a geometry change where the tree looks like it's actually more on solid ground. And so I find that that's very helpful as well, because again, it gives you more variety in the tree heights, more opportunity to add in a custom branch if you need to add something fun for a silhouette, etc. And I don't think the screenshots I'm sharing this week have anything really showcased, but I did pop into the forest again and remove some of the spruce logs and replace them with pale oak, just to have that like variation in bark texture. And it's subtle again, but it does provide some unique kind of texture shifts as you walk around and look around. But really, I'm trying to remind myself constantly as I'm working on this that this is not a main feature. Like this is a background. Like it's meant to be something that looks finished, but doesn't kind of pull your eye from the stuff that you're supposed to be looking at, which is like the farms and the paths and the orchard and the like the canoe and the light, you know, the wharves and things that are all the details on the east bank. The west bank is just meant to be like essentially like a border. It's almost like a world border. Like you want to have like the eye contained. I kind of want the eye to bounce off of it and come back to what we're working on. But it's still fun to have that feeling of completion when you're looking around the valley. It's nice to have that sort of vibe.
Yeah, I think when you're the one who's built everything, it can maybe be easier to look at all of the more exciting stuff you've built in the foreground and think of that as background detail because you've just been looking at it for so long. Whereas somebody who's new to the area is absolutely going to be more interested in all of the custom farms you built and like the paths that the road take you towards the town, rather than worrying about whether or not the landscaping in the spruce forest surrounding it is perfect. So yeah, I think either way, visitors to the area are going to have a lot to look at, and the landscaping is just going to be the icing on the cake, really.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't see anybody walking into the town going like, "That's a really cool town, Joel." But man, that spruce to grass ratio
Yeah,
is
what were you
just
thinking?
perfect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like just yeah,
Yeah.
like just not that's not a thing. So, well, I'm looking forward to bringing some people around, and hopefully you've got some time to pop in as well, because I think it'll be really fun to kind of bring people that have only been seeing it from outside to actually walk around in it and chat about it. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, have like an open house, have like a tour
Yeah.
day almost. Yeah, that'd be great.
Moving into the news this week, we of course have the Bedrock the Bedrock Edition preview. Lots of different terms to remember in Minecraft. We've got a couple of things actually. There was an article that came out called "Test the Copper Golem Statue and Shelf Block" on Minecraft.net. Quoting the article, "Now that our testing players are doing more with copper, it's time to put it on display. This testing moment brings the adorable Copper Golem statue and the shelf block. You can test both these features in Bedrock Preview and Beta right now, and they're also coming to a Java snapshot soon." Soon, Mojang. You've said soon a number of times. We're all waiting. Minecraft Bedrock Edition Preview 1.21.110.20 was released on July 22nd, 2025. Quote, "We've removed the experimental toggle for game drop features, so you can now enjoy them as normal worlds without flipping any switches. As always, your feedback and bug reports are incredibly valuable, especially during betas and previews. Keep them coming." Features in this preview: the shelf. The shelf is a new type of decorative block crafted from every wood type, including bamboo, warped, and crimson. The shelf can be crafted from 6 matching blocks of any stripped log, stripped stem, or block of stripped bamboo. This recipe produces 6 shelves. The shelf can store up to 3 item stacks. Interacting with any of the 3 slots in the front swaps the player's main hand item with the content of that slot. The shelf displays all items it contains in front of it, similar to an item frame. While a shelf is powered by redstone, its front texture changes to reflect that it's powered. When placed next to each other, up to 3 powered shelves will connect. Interacting with a single powered shelf swaps all its contents with the 3 rightmost items in the player's hotbar. Interacting with 2 connected shelves swaps their contents with the 6 rightmost items in the player's hotbar, and interacting with 3 connected shelves swaps their contents with all items in the player's hotbar. It does not matter which of the connected shelves the player interacts with. Changes to the Copper Golem. If the Copper Golem has fully oxidized, it will turn into a Copper Golem statue block. When turned into a Copper Golem statue block, it will freeze in a random pose. When turned into a Copper Golem statue, the Copper Golem will drop any item it may be holding. A Copper Golem turned into a Copper Golem statue will keep its name if name tagged. Interacting with the Copper Golem with an empty hand will drop its carried item. The Copper Golem now interacts with trapped chests. Unwaxing or scraping the Copper Golem using an axe now affects the durability of the axe. A Copper Golem saved by a Totem of Undying no longer becomes passive. Copper Golem no longer continues chest interaction animation while panicking. The Copper Golem now sorts different named items of the same type together. Copper Golems now sort the same item together even when durability is different. Copper Golems now sort bundles of the same color together. And Copper Golem chest interaction sounds now match the animation more closely. The Copper Golem now turns its head when looking at the player. Talking about the Copper Golem statue block, it's a new type of decorative block which has waxed and oxidized variants. A Copper Golem statue block oxidizes over time and can be waxed like copper blocks. The pose of the block can be changed by interacting with it. If the Copper Golem statue block has no oxidation when the player interacts with it using the axe, the block will turn into a Copper Golem again. When connecting to redstone comparators, the Copper Golem statue block emits a redstone signal based on its current pose. Under accessibility, dye colors have updated icons. The goal with these is to enhance visual cohesion across the dye set while maintaining distinct shapes to support colorblind accessibility. Some blocks that could catch fire with flint and steel, like the top stone slab or wood stair, will now also catch fire during fire explosion, such as those from fireballs. Glass blocks will now catch fire with flint and steel or fire explosions, and I fixed a bug where placing water from a water bucket onto a block containing another block, i.e. a button or lever, would not allow the user to remove that water block afterwards. The copper chest lid now has a copper texture, and the double copper chest now give their groove at the front. For copper equipment, hostile monsters now have a chance to spawn with copper armor equipped, and hostile monsters can pick up and use copper weapons and armor. The remainder of the changelog has details of some of the bug fixes, gameplay tweaks, and minor adjustments to vibrant visuals. For more details, check out the Minecraft.net changelog article linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
And the tongue twister of the week is copper golem statue block, and insert, oxidized, weathered, whatever state you want to have it in. It's the new waxed, lightly weathered cut copper stairs, or whatever the thing was from back in the day. We're going to save our thoughts on shelves for today's main discussion. They really feel like the most interesting aspect of the week, so we wanted to dedicate more time to that. I think one thing I've noticed about the Copper Golem functionality that they've changed this week is that it's still a little unclear from the changelog. You can still have functional copper golems in all 4 oxidation states. So it says oxidized copper golems will come to a stop and turn into a statue. That happens eventually. It happens basically as like another age stage. And so the fully oxidized ones, while they eventually stop working, can still be waxed while they're fully oxidized, and that can kind of keep them going. You can also create them in that oxidation state by using a copper block of that oxidation state when you create the copper golem with the pumpkin, so you don't have to worry as much about creating one of those and then it immediately freezes in place, like it seems to be something that still happens over a very slow amount of time. But you can only bring a fresh copper golem back to life from statue form, so you need to scrape the oxidation all the way off to revive it. But once it's a fresh copper golem, you tap it with an axe one more time and it comes to life, which is interesting. It gives you a second way to create copper golems if you don't want to create one with a copper chest, so I think that's interesting. I'm not certain what the crafting recipe is, but I assume it involves an oxidized block of a certain type if you're creating them at different stages, so I'd be interested to see how people like that. I haven't seen too much community feedback from that right now, but it seems like, having ways to create them as statues instead of having to wait for the statues, having to wait for the copper golems to become statues to freeze in place, I think seems like a good quality of life thing, so that players don't have to wait hours and hours to just get a decorative feature, right?
Yeah, my thought was the opposite direction. Was unfortunately the natural march of a copper golem to an eventual statue means that you have to wax all of your copper golems, and
yeah,
I don't know how clear that is. Like, I feel like the uninitiated player might not think to wax a copper golem, and then it's going to oxidize and all of a sudden stop working. You're going to go over to your sorting system or your sorting friend in your early game, and like, why is he frozen in the middle of the room? Because unless you see it happening, and unless you know about, the way to oxidize it and scrape it off, then it might not be as clear. And I guess at some point you have to figure out waxing copper blocks, but I don't know whether the game gives you that information either. So that seems to be more of a community / wiki thing. I do kind of think it would be nice, even though I guess it would go against having copper golem statue blocks in all the different variations of oxidation, if there was a texture change from the oxidized copper golem to the oxidized copper golem statue. Like,
right.
If it changed, if there was like another, like, to show that it's gone from the 4 different stages of being a copper golem to the 5th stage of being a copper golem statue, if that texture shifted as opposed to the copper golem just freezing in place, then that might be interesting. I don't know whether they could do something with maybe the antenna on top, or like something to kind of indicate that it's no longer functioning. I know the eyes dim, I think.
Yeah, no, it seems like right now the eyes are the main thing that indicates it. Like, they'll be lit up. But again, like copper bulbs, they slowly dim as the copper golem ages, so there's a very subtle difference between an oxidized copper golem that's still functioning and one that's switched off.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like it could be a little bit clearer to the player. Well, I mean, again, seasoned player and players that listen to the Spawn Chunks podcast are going to be informed, but like it's maybe not going to be so obvious to somebody that's new. I do like the idea of the statues. I think they're neat, and it kind of brings in what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, which was the idea of other Minecraft mobs from the votes coming in, and the statue thing is the tough golem idea, right? Like, that's something that they had with the tough golems, were like turning into statues and holding items around your base. So the copper golem being a statue in this case is kind of pulling from that idea. And I like that it has a redstone output. Like it gives something cool for technical players to play with. I watched Eximovoid's video and there's only 4 different poses. And so there's only 4 different redstone signals, 1 through 4. I feel like maybe 8 could be more fun and also more robust in terms of the number of signals that it puts out. So maybe they'll add more later. And I guess that's the kind of thing where they have room to do that. Like once the drop comes out, they could either add more poses for the drop, or later on they could just add more poses later in another drop and just have it be something that kind of flushes out over time. But it's also a very small model. I'm not sure how many poses you could put it in terms of like what it's capable of and what might look good. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it's definitely some good quality of life features to the golem that have been updated.
Yeah, I'm curious how many people are going to end up using the redstone thing, but I think the statues themselves being posable and manipulatable by the player, like you can right click on them to sort of cycle through the different poses, I think that has potential for some really interesting combination locks. It's not something you could rely on the golems themselves to naturally like notify you when they've powered down, unless you kind of trap them in a small enough space that you could monitor it with a comparator constantly. But if you had, say, like a couple of golems and you wanted the combination to be like 3, 1, 2, 4, and you had to kind of match the poses to that, then you could run some redstone behind the scenes, check for those signal strengths, and have a combination lock like that. So that could be kind of interesting for like a copper golem based like pin to get into your base or something. Yeah. I assume this kind of functionality is coming to Java Edition as well, which makes me wonder if this might prompt some changes to armor stands to bring them in line with how armor stands function on Bedrock, because they're going to be fairly similar from the statue to the armor stand in terms of the posability. On Bedrock Edition, you can right-click on armor stands to cycle through different poses that are the default ones, and you can get those through commands and through the armor stand books that people have data packed into Java Edition, but that's not in Java Edition by default. So I'd be curious if this leads to armor stands from Java Edition getting kind of brought up to parity with the version that we have on Bedrock Edition, where they also have arms as well. So I'm curious if the Copper Golem being a statue leads to that parity feature being revisited.
I mean, as somebody that has both a mod and a data pack on the server to have posable armor stands and use them for positioning blocks and things around, like I can't see Mojang making the armor stands be invisible, but I could certainly see, posable for, creating characters, like putting armor on the stand, putting items in hands and having like heads and characters, around your world. I could absolutely see that being a vanilla feature. I think that's very creative. Like I feel like that's something that would be something that Mojang might lean into if they decided to go that way. I don't know if you can stop someone from changing the copper golem position. So like if you have a copper golem as a statue, like on your front doorstep, like I don't know what stops your server mates from trolling you and changing its position every time they walk by.
Yeah.
So, it's sort of like with signs where you can like wax a sign and keep it from being interacted with, unless it's destroyed, I think, or unwaxed. I can't remember. Is it signs waxing? That's how you do it, right?
Yeah, you can freeze the text on a sign, yeah, and I think only destroying it and putting it back up is what allows you to change it.
Yeah, so for me, like I don't wax my signs because I'm very often going around and using decorative text on signs, like creating nails or things like that, patterns on houses, and so very often I want to go run over to a sign, like, oh, I like the pattern that I did on that house. I'll run over, open it up, copy it, and then go back and paste it on the new sign. So I don't tend to wax my signs at all. Plus, I don't have a server where people are going to come up and mess with my signs, so that's nice. But yeah, there's definitely some interesting stuff here. Like I like that they've kind of added more to the copper golem, and I think to your point too, like having the ability to take an item from a copper golem, or if a copper golem freezes and turns into a statue, it's going to drop that item on the ground. I think is good. Although I mean that's not going to be great if it's a pickaxe. Like if it's sorting valuable gear, then again, like you're really going to want to make sure you wax those golems that are like moving important stuff around.
Yeah, I think to that point, for a start, the Java advancements at least has something that encourages you to wax and unwax copper blocks to learn those mechanics. That's an advancement.
Right.
I don't know for Bedrock achievements, but either way, the functionality is signposted to a certain extent to players. And I think once you acquire copper blocks, maybe even the recipe toast pops up to show that you can do that in a crafting table. So the association can be made even when you don't necessarily have like the achievement for it yet. So maybe people will assume that since copper's been in the game for a while and that functionality is there, you can do something similar with copper golems. I think if it's your first time doing stuff with copper golems and you're unaware of the waxing mechanics, it seems unlikely that you'll be making anything that seems like crucial enough that finding out organically that the copper golems slow down as they age and freeze eventually is going to be completely game breaking for you, or like, you know, make you lose out on anything too important. Meanwhile, yeah, I do think having the interact to have a golem drop something is a really important step, mostly because of that's the main issue I've seen people give feedback on, is when they get stuck in the middle of unloading stuff because they find an item that doesn't correspond to any of the chests around them. And I think it makes perfect sense that there's a way of having them avoid that behavior. I think it's also cool that now it sorts renamed items. So if you, for example, like I use like a stack of netherrack renamed to sort out like item filter material, like when I'm building a sorting system. But if I have a bunch of that just lying around in like a copper chest, it's going to look for another chest that contains netherrack, and even though the item is renamed to make sure that it doesn't stack with other stuff, it will just sort that into the same chest as the rest of the netherrack. The same goes for like if you've renamed a sword, let's say, and in this case now display names are no longer a concern, but neither is durability. So like if you've named an iron sword, you know, zombie slayer or something like that, and then that sword has been used to within an inch of its life, it's going to find a chest that has a fully repaired iron sword, like a fresh iron sword in there, and it's going to put your zombie slayer sword in there regardless of the durability and the fact that it's been renamed. And that also means that shulker boxes, potentially, if you combine those, you know, they'll put renamed shulker boxes in with the other shulker boxes of the same color. I'm still not certain if it does contents differently. Like it mentions in the changelog that bundles are now sorted together by color, but I don't know if it means that bundles with contents are sorted the same way, because that's additional NBT data. And for what it's worth, I think they still ignore stuff like enchantments. They will account for when a book is an enchanted book that has mending versus an enchanted book that has unbreaking, and it won't sort those into the same chest. So there's still probably a little bit of nuance there for the people who wanted to fine-tune stuff and didn't want the copper golem's functionality to just be a laze sorting things from chest to chest. So as long as some of that nuance stays in, I'm really happy with them. I think it's nice to have something that can pair the functionality in an interesting way, and one mob that does stuff that the other mob doesn't. I think that's the key for synergy between the copper golem and the LA long term.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that I like those changes as well to the durability on things like a sword, because one of my thoughts when I first saw that it sorted things with different durability into different chests, despite the fact that they were both like iron shovels or whatever, I thought, man, it's cool that it's so exact, but it's almost too exact. Like, it just,
Yeah.
I don't have that many chests. I don't care to separate my shovels from different durabilities. Like, I kind of want all of my shovels in the same chest if that was the case, right? And so I'm glad that they've got that in there as well. And keeping it with the ability to sort out a mending book is also great. I mean, or any other kind of book that you want, like Unbreaking 2, like whatever that happens to be. I'm wondering if people are going to have that be something that happens in like a villager trading hall where you've got like a lot of books floating around, or I don't know where else you would get books from in terms of like needing them to be sorted. But it's like I don't tend to get books en masse. I tend to be getting them like one or two at a time, so I can usually sort them myself. But I like the idea of, you know, grabbing a bunch of your books from your villager breeders, and maybe it's, you know, like you don't want to go through them all, putting them all in the copper chest. Just have the one chest for mending books and have everything else go into another chest with a hopper in it, and that just gets taken away so that you can then like remove the enchantments or whatever, and kind of rinse and repeat. It could be kind of fun way to fuel your villager trading hall for mending and stuff like that. Like I'm looking forward to messing around with the copper golems at some point when they come to Java. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and another use case I was thinking of is if you have an enchanted book shop on a multiplayer server, for example. Say you've got like an enchanting setup upstairs, and you just fill your inventory with books, get as many levels as you can, go up there, enchant a book, throw it into a hopper. The hopper drains down into a copper chest, and a copper golem is like manning the storefront, making sure that your bookshelves are all filled up with the right type of books. You know, you could very easily do something like that. Even like, you know, it sorts it into a chest, that chest goes into a hopper, the hopper goes into like a chiseled bookshelf, and then you've got books that you can literally pull off the shelves and they get replaced when you've decided you want to buy one. So there's lots of like fun opportunities with that, and I think it's good, like I said, that the copper golem has some unique functionality in that way. Speaking of unique things, we now have new die sprites as well, and you mentioned earlier when we were getting set up here that as an artist you have opinions about how the new die sprites look. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think the effort is great, and I applaud them trying to make it different for silhouettes for people that have color blindness issues. But I do find that the little plaque that they put all the die on now, so instead of the die just being like a blob in your inventory, it looks like it's on a small pallet in the same way that like a mason would have a pallet of mortar that they might be, you know, moving around their build. And what that does is it does kind of homogenize at least the bottom half of all of the textures. So previously you would have a full 360 degrees of texture shape in the inventory to discern from one die to another. And now you really only have the top half. And I would say that obviously the new textures look good from a pixel art perspective. I really quite like them. And they, from that sort of point of view, I think they're great. I do feel like a number of them sort of look the same in terms of they're a little similar. So like the magenta and the pink are very close. The cyan and the light blue are very close. Actually, all the cyan and the two other blues are actually quite close in silhouette. And I feel like the brown and the gray, the dark gray, the light gray is kind of a mirror, so that's not too bad. But there's definitely a few that I feel like these might be a little bit tougher. Now, if you're someone that is colorblind and you are relying on the shapes, you're probably a lot better at picking them out than someone that isn't. And so that, you know, I'd be curious to see or hear from anybody that deals with any kind of color blindness, especially if it's not like full spectrum. Like if you've got like some colors you can see and can't see, and then others that you can, then I'd be curious to see how this all plays out. But yeah, overall, like I think for someone that does see color, I think they do look great. Like I think it's a fun change, and I think it again, it's one of those pixel art updates that helps Minecraft feel like a modern pixel art game as opposed to one that's 16 years old. And so I quite like them for that. But I do think there's a couple that are a little bit too similar from a silhouette perspective. And I guess just from a subjective standpoint, they all just kind of look like blobs, except for a few. Like the green looks more solid, you know, like it looks more like a crystal than it does maybe like a paint blob. And I'm wondering if they could have done that with something similar to like the magenta or even the purple. The purple and the magenta are pretty close even for someone that does see color. And I kind of wonder whether they could have made them look more, I guess, change the viscosity, the transparency, or the density, I guess, of the pixel art to kind of give it different material. Like, yes, I know they're all dye, but sometimes dye can be powder form, you know, like in real life, and sometimes it can be liquid. So I feel like they could have done a little bit there, but that's kind of nitpicky.
Yeah, no, I totally see what you mean about the bottom half of the palette sort of texture of them being the same throughout, and that's interesting. Like, again, would really appreciate the view of somebody who is colorblind and is like taking a look at these for the first time, what their thoughts are. I think it's neat that they've managed to keep some of the silhouettes similar enough to the dye items we already have that
Agreed.
You're going to have some like stuff that immediately reads like cactus green and red look very similar to me. There's a couple that have changed subtly, like the blue now sort of, it's got like the physics. It sort of looks like a lump that's resting on the palette texture. And I think the same goes for black, where they've changed that from ink. It's no longer like a little mustache shape or whatever. But I think the main criticism of this I've seen is that people could use them as other things because they were like a perfect sort of ellipse before that. Some of the dyes could be used as like, you know, buttons on something, or like they people use them in item frames for different stuff. And now it is harder to like have them stand out as something unique and different because of the homogeneity of the die palette sprite that they've been given. So I wonder if maybe there's another iteration on that that's going to happen at some stage. But I'm kind of curious if they're just happy with the fact that these all look like dies now, and that's just going to be the compromise that we have to make as a community. I think there are a decent amount of other items that could be used as fake buttons if you really needed to find one. But yeah, it's interesting to see the use cases that get ruled out by something like this, like a change like this being made.
I'm still holding on for die blocks because I think it would be great for storage. Like, I think condensing your storage if you have a lot of die, I think would be great. But also just the opportunity for some really cool textures and some very bright colors would be fun, I think, for die blocks.
Yeah. One of the folks in our live chat has just very helpfully linked to a comment by Rondi from the discussion that happened in the snapshot chat in the Discord a little bit earlier this week. And Rondi says, as a colorblind person here, the current shapes were fine, only the completely round ones needed changing. I think the newer textures are worse, and I think the problem is that they added a diamondy shape at the bottom of all of them. It makes it harder to tell the different shapes at a glance. Yeah. So thank you, Rondi, for that feedback. And yeah, I think it's interesting to see how that's going to affect different people's experience of them. Maybe it's something we'll get used to since these all are relatively new, but yeah, once again, I'm wondering if the art team is taking that kind of feedback on board and is considering taking another pass at them.
Moving on into the email for this week, chunk mail, of course, is the section where we give our listeners a chance to chime in, write in, share your thoughts. If you can keep those emails short, sweet, to the point, it does help us put them on the show. And the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please use that email address. It's the only one that we check for things like that. So sending an email on a Spotify comment or on YouTube is not the best way to get it noticed, because it's just, there's so much of it that we have to kind of keep it all in one spot. So it's spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. And Jonny's got the first one.
Yes, this comes in from Nerd Artist with the subject of 2-block high copper chests. What if copper double chests were vertical instead of horizontal? This could help simplify the segmented copper golem system, where each golem has a series of chests to sort into, with the last chest emptied by a hopper. A 2-high chest could receive an input from that hopper 1 block lower than the chests, and then make it available to the next golem while keeping all of the chests at the same height. This would eliminate the need for a vertical dropper and comparator system, and further reduce the necessary redstone complexity for sorting systems. It could even be a different recipe, 2 matching copper chests with a carved pumpkin on top, and would become linked to the generated golem only. If you break the chest, the associated golem perishes, and only the standard copper chests drop, so you need to be somewhat careful where you're placing it. The pairing of chests and particular golems has been requested, and this could give a way to acquire them. Nerd Artist was pinched to death for not coming up with a better death message.
I like the idea of a 2-high block chest, especially copper chest. I think it's a neat one. It gives some extra functionality to the copper chest, as well as decorative options, storage options, options for tight spaces, attaching hoppers at 2 different Y levels to the same chest, which I think is interesting. And I feel like if they were in the game, I feel like they should be crafted in the same way that a chest is. Like, I don't think you should be crafting them specifically to get also a copper golem with them. Like, I kind of feel like if a double chest was to be double high, then I feel like the thing to do would be to build it in the game just like you do make a double chest now. The problem, of course, is that currently shift clicking on the top of a chest is how you just place another chest on top of it. And so I don't know what you do if you want 2 copper chests not connected on top of one another. Like, how do you, what button do you press in order to, like, not open the chest but also not connect them? So there's a little bit of a tricky kind of UI GUI interaction there, but I like the idea of a 2-high double chest. Like, it really kind of speaks to something unique and different about the copper chest. And because they're made out of metal, it seems like it'd be more possible. Like, there's just all kinds of fun stuff about it. What do you think about a 2-high copper chest?
I have definitely seen some cursed-looking tall chests suggested by folks who make data packs and mods and that kind of thing. In fact, I just did a quick Google search and I found from the Phoenix SC subreddit a data pack somebody had made with a double chest where the latch for the chest is on the end, not on the side, and not on the long side, a too tall chest with the chest texture just at the top, a slab chest, so it's this sort of like little briefcase style thing, and also one that's an L shape. And yeah, I think all of these could even have their individual uses. You know, you imagine having a slab chest in an area where you didn't have room for a full chest, or, you know, you wanted it to fit with the aesthetic of a certain area. I think the too high chest looks a little odd in this example. I'm sure Mojang could tinker with it and have some fun with it. And it certainly solves a few issues with regards to the like arrangement of stuff attached to chests, right? I think that's a really interesting prospect. I think the look of it is probably the biggest thing I would have a problem with, whether it looked like this, where the top block of the chest is the part that has the opening. You got to consider what it looks like when a copper golem interacts with a chest like that, if they're interacting with it from ground level or below, because they have like a 1.5 block reach. Does it still look like they are interacting with the chest properly if they're reaching up to it, and then the opening of the chest is like another 1.5 blocks above that? I also like the idea that, like, they kind of have to reach in really deep to, like, get the stuff from the bottom of the chest. Also, how do you represent this physically when you're looking at the GUI for that chest? Like, does it turn the sort of 54 block double chest UI on its side and have it be, 6x9 instead of 9x6, you know? I think there's a few additional problems to solve there that would feel a little clunky in Minecraft's current UI and current way of interacting with things. So the aesthetics of it bother me more than the functionality. I think the functionality of the idea is rock solid, but I think the aesthetics of it might be off-putting to the point where it looks kind of cursed. I was even thinking about it if you had it on its side and had the texture still applied the same way, so it sort of opened outwards towards you instead of upwards. That would still feel kind of strange, because you'd imagine all the contents would kind of come tumbling out, like you're opening a wardrobe door that you've just had a bunch of stuff like resting up against the inside of it. So yeah, I think really the aesthetic consideration is the one that's given me pause for this idea.
So, and my brain did not put the latch on the top. I kind of leapt to having it be more like a locker, like a school locker or a gym locker.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
With the copper, and that actually made me think of the idea of just having too tall chests in Minecraft in general, like having this kind of ability in the game. But I think that instead of making it a chest, from a decorative standpoint and from a functionality standpoint, if you make it a different thing, like what if, I know we just got shelves, but like what if Minecraft introduced the cabinet, which could be a 1 block tall cabinet, or it could be a 2 block tall storage cabinet. And the door would open like you would expect, like a cabinet door would open like a kitchen cabinet. And so you've got decorative potential, you've got 2 tall storage potential. It could possibly interact with hoppers the same way that barrels and chests do. There's just, I feel like there's some potential there. And I guess you could make them out of all the different wood types if you wanted to. So again, like where chests right now don't do that, you could add some, different abilities to it, much like they did with the shelf. Like, I mean, my brain was very much saturated in shelf this week. So when I thought about the cabinet, I was kind of thinking like of this weird combination of like shelf and chest together. And I think that it could be a lot of fun to have that kind of functionality in Minecraft. Like I'm sure there's lots of technical players that would love to have a pink sorting system. Like if you could make your cabinets instead of chests and work with them that way, then that could be cool. But then again, if it was a separate block, it might not be something that the copper golem could interact with, right? So like that then limits the idea there. To go back to Nerd Artist's email, the part where they lost me was the additional functionality of the copper golem sorting into specific chests, having it like linked or die if the chest is destroyed. Like there was a lot of really specific functionality that I don't think you're going to see from Mojang, and kind of falls into that camp of player feedback of like making the copper golem do too much, as opposed to being a simple system that the player can then tweak and augment and complicate or simplify it on their own accord, rather than having the copper golem be so specific and have all of this kind of like make easy functionality. I feel like in this case, the more simple the Copper Golem is, which is I think what they've done in the revisions this week by removing durability as a separator function, like it simplifies it a bit, and in doing that, almost makes it more useful than if it's too specific. And I think maybe the specific linking of chests and copper golems here is a little bit too complicated. Plus, like, I'm not sure how you communicate that to a player. And once you have 3 or 4 copper golems walking around, like, how can you tell which one goes to which chest? Like, you'd have to separate them in tracks, maybe. Like, it's not the most intuitive thing.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's a little overcomplicated, and the more specialized something becomes, the fewer uses there end up being for it. And yeah, I think they're definitely moving towards diversifying what you can do with the copper golem instead of specializing it towards one specific use.
Moving into the main discussion, we are going to be talking about the shelves. Is it a decorative block? Is it a functioning block? Is it a hotbar management system? It's both, actually. And I got to mess around with it this week. I think you did as well. And so we thought we'd talk about what we discovered, what our thoughts are for the future. And I'm champing at the bit to get this into Java to play around with it in a game that I'm a little bit more familiar with. I don't know, this is just anecdotal, but I found messing around in creative in Bedrock very different. It was really strange. And I couldn't put my finger on necessarily everything. I did feel like movement was odd. Like, I know that you don't slide around like you do in Java, but just everything about it, I just felt like I was misclicking all the time, and I just did not find even inventory searching and management to be as clear. I feel like stack sizes kind of disappeared sometimes, where like I thought I would have the single, but I would have a stack. Like, it was odd. And so I'm looking forward to playing around in creative or in a survival world where I don't have those UI hurdles kind of hampering me and distracting me from what I can do with these things.
Yeah, I have the same problem whenever I go into Bedrock Edition, because you can't number hotkey stuff into your hotbar, and that's the stuff that I use so often when I'm in a creative world just to simplify things.
Right.
And especially when I just want to grab a bunch of random items to test, grabbing them individually and then shift clicking them into my my hotbar, just like it didn't feel as good as the way you can control creative on Java Edition. But that's sort of getting into the weeds, I think, a little bit. It's just like right now I'm champing at the bit for it to come to Java Edition, just so I can play around with it in some of the creative worlds I've already started there and see how it fits in with a couple of different things. I think the main stuff about the shelf, you can almost split it into different use cases, because there's definitely a decorative use case. There are so many decorative use cases for this. There's a functional use case that feels like more casual use, and then there's the redstone functionality, which feels like the closest thing to inventory management that this feature is really going to be capable of. So where would you like to start? What do you want to dive into first?
Well, I dove into the decoration first. Like, when I loaded up the world, that's the first thing I was exploring. Like, I knew they had some functionality, but the first thing I wanted to do was mess around with the building. And I think that's probably where this block has the most appeal for me, which I don't think is going to surprise many listeners because of how much of a builder that I am. I think that where each shelf has a unique texture, front and back, really does give it some variation in terms of the things that you can use it for. And I mean, I was thinking of everything from trim, molding, ground molding, wall texture variation, recessed wall decoration. So like, depending on which way you're facing and which part of the block you put the shelf on, it can either be flush with your wall, or it can be like I guess it's 8 pixels. No, it's 8 pixels wide. So it's 5 pixels or 3 pixels embedded from the edge. And I really felt like it could be used as like thinner walls. Like, I use trapdoors sometimes in West Hill to create like a thin wall on an upper level of a house. You could use these depending on the colors and textures if they're appropriate. And you could even recess them into pillars. The backs of them don't have vertical pattern on them, but they could be used in that way, I guess. And so I really feel like there's a lot of potential there. I mean, I've got some specific examples, but like, what was your first impression? Like, when you started building around with them, like, what were the first things that you used them for?
Functionality aside, I got hold of these and I was like, oh, they've added vertical slabs to the game. Then that's basically what this is, right? Like, there's a really great middle ground here between something like a trapdoor and maybe the edge of a stair block, for example. And so I immediately thought about like making the curves of archways smoother and adding detail to the tops of columns and things like that. I think there's fantastic use cases for those. I played around a little bit with being able to put other items in the slots as a decorative function as well, rather than as an inventory storage function. And the detail you can add to a column there, you can put... I tried it with a few different like quartz blocks and things like that, but I ended up with lodestones in there, sort of trying to mimic the sort of curled patterns that you get in some Greek columns. And like there's some really great stuff you can do with that, with pale oak, one of those, with faux marble, whatever texture you want, whether it's like smooth quartz or stripped pale oak, and various other like blocks will really add to that aesthetic. So I had some fun with that. I can see it being used as exterior side paneling for houses if you want wood panel kind of effects on some faces of a house. Interior wall paneling, of course. It just feels incredibly versatile, and the fact that it doesn't occupy such a deep block space that it feels like it brings the room in around you. It actually feels like a furniture detail rather than something that's going to obstruct an entire block, even though for practical purposes you can't put anything else in the block space. But I think it's great. Like, as far as what we're likely to get in terms of what Mojang have said in future, I think this is as close to a vertical slab as we get. The fact that it's in 12 colors as well, because that's all of the different wood types, plus bamboo, if you count that as a wood, and the giant fungus from the nether, which some people still say is not wood, even though it turns into planks and everything else. I think that's going to go a long way to appeasing builders who want a decorative touch. There's enough color range in the wood types that we have right now, especially since cherry wood has been added, mangrove is there as well. Like, there's a lot of those. Even stuff like warped is going to hopefully bridge the gap to prismarine color palettes and bluer color palettes and things like that. So I think we've got a lot just in this one block in its 12 variations.
I think the specific use of putting blocks in the shelf as decoration, not just storage, is really what unlocks a lot of potential. The things that I thought of immediately when I saw the shape of the shelf was to put 2 acacia shelves back to back as an I-beam, like a steel construction I-beam.
Yes.
But then also the dark oak shelf is great for like the front of a car. And then you can use frog lights or something else like sea lanterns in the 1 and 6 slots for headlights on a car. I mean, the example that I did on stream was really basic, but like for people that are better at those kind of like detailed builds, I think that you really have some opportunities, especially now that you also have like trapdoors in a lot of these blocks. Now, some of the trapdoors are not solid, so like a dark oak trapdoor and a spruce trapdoor are going to be probably more useful pairing with the shelves than say something like an acacia or a mangrove that's got a big hole in it. But it depends on how you're using it. And I think that there's some potential there, which I think is really cool. You can also, I was experimenting with having banners, like black banners in the shelf for like the front grille of the card, like to give even more vertical stripes to it. Depending on how you want to power it, like those vertical sections disappear when you power a shelf so that you can have just a single band. The trick there is, though, there's still going to be a separation every 3, so you can't group more than 3 together, and so you have to like plan your build out. If you're going to have them with that texture, you're probably going to be doing like 3, 6, or 9, because otherwise you're going to have different positions for that different detail. And I also thought that the back of some of these had some immediate uses. So I did this little industrial build where I made like a brick and granite wall, put some I-beams on it. And then later on, I went back and I put the back of the dark oak shelf facing front on the wall, so it was flush. And it's got like what looks like rivets on it. And granted, I was in Vibrant Visuals at the time, so the dark oak looked kind of darker. But it doesn't really read as wood in that context. It reads like an old piece of like brown or rusty metal that's got rivets in it all along it. So there's some cool things that you could do for industrial building or more modern detail. I love the warped shelves. They have a really fun squiggle on them, and that's just great for like, you can just run a strip of them down your wall as like a detail, like a wallpaper strip or a trim or an accent. Really high contrast with things like quartz or pale oak wood, that kind of thing. And as you mentioned, that obviously goes well with prismarine. And I like the fact that in most cases, these are closer to the stripped wood texture than they are the plank texture.
Yeah.
I find that's a lot more subtle. It's a lot more easier to work into other builds. It's a little bit challenging sometimes because sometimes the stripped wood texture for things like jungle and spruce has some green in it. So when you put the spruce shelf next to spruce planks, it looks a little funky. Like it doesn't look clean. Like it looks kind of green. And so that might be a little bit challenging. So not as useful as, say, a trapdoor in spruce, which is very similar to a spruce plank texture. And I also found the jungle was the same way. And they also have the grains on their texture will travel in different directions on woods like mangrove and jungle as well. Probably to better match with the wood textures there. But I also thought when I was messing around with the bamboo texture, even though I don't mess with bamboo that much in my builds, it has this like cross pattern. So the bamboo goes both vertical and horizontal, but the vertical match perfectly with the existing bamboo. So you could have these shelves facing outward and having like little accent details, kind of like having a cracked brick block in your brick wall. It's sort of like having like a patch block in your bamboo. So if you had like a big bamboo fence, depending on how thick it was, if you could hide the shelf from the other side, you could have a lot of detail in the outside of your bamboo wall without really having to do much. So there's some really cool potential here.
Yeah, I think it's great that they don't need a supporting block either, so you can have them like just in builds like that, like the outside wall can look different. You can use them as partition walls inside of a house, the way people do that with trapdoors now. Like there's a lot to them, even outside of the functionality. And then moving on to talk a bit more about the functionality, you mentioned putting banners in there as part of a like a car radiator grille. I think I've seen a lot of people so far using them as signage for shops and things like that. And in fact, I think that's even what our second email was about, if we want to wrap that into the discussion now.
Yeah, Radio Iron wrote in and said that I jumped straight into Bedrock to test out building with the new shelf blocks, and it's exciting stuff. Immediately, I thought of how the shelf could be used for signs and banners, and I've attached a screenshot of my version of a marquee that they whipped up. Do you guys have any unexpected ideas on how to use shelves besides use as a shelf? And it's really surprisingly how accurate it looks like the marquees that I drive by. You know, with those signages that you see next to the road where somebody kind of goes out and like removes the letters off of tracks and puts them in as like the grocery store has a new weekly special, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you have a lot of these banners around with the different letters on them, like you could very easily change your signage. Like it doesn't have to be a permanent thing. You could swap out different letters for different words and things in your Minecraft world. Like I'm thinking like a scoreboard for a mini game, or leaving messages for players, or changing the like if you had a store on a server, like you could just change the specials, the content, the pricing, like all that kind of stuff is very easily switchable. I mean, yes, you can do that with signs, but you can't see signs from very far away. Whereas I don't know what the render distance is on the shelves. I was up close to them the whole time. I didn't really back up very far, but at the very least, even if the sign and the shelf are the same distance from the player, it's going to be a lot easier to read this kind of banner signage because the letters are going to be much bigger and bolder and easier to read.
My first thought, weirdly, was those like colorful letter fridge magnets that you can get, and imagining those kind of on the side of like a fridge in a more domestic looking build, you know. Obviously, you'd only be able to fit a certain amount of them in there, but I think it's a really fun idea. And I think, yeah, like the rendering thing is probably going to be, it's going to be fine for the shelves themselves, which is what I think makes them quite versatile as a building block, because they're going to be rendered as blocks rather than as like tile entities. So I think they'll still render pretty well from a distance. I'm not sure about the items contained by the shelves. Like I'm not certain if there's going to be an issue with the banners not displaying until you're much closer, but even then you're going to need to be much closer to read them at that scale anyway, so it sort of makes sense. And yeah, in terms of like other uses for stuff like this, I think maybe like displaying potion recipes in a brewing lab could be a really interesting one if you're still kind of getting used to the potion brewing recipes, or you want to have like a diagram for a custom brewing recipe or something like that. You can have all of the ingredients in order displayed on a shelf next to the brewing stand, and maybe, you know, have the potion that it makes in an item frame next to it so that you can see which one it is. I think, yeah, using them for labeling systems, especially as multi-item storage becomes more common with the copper golem involved, you can have like a couple of the shelves above a chest that's got, you know, a specific set of items in, and that way you can tell at a glance which maybe a single item frame just displaying, you know, acacia stairs isn't going to let you know that the rest of the acacia wood type items are in there, whereas you could display 9 of them if you had 3 shelves stacked on top of each other. I think it's going to be really interesting to label storage systems that way, but the sky's the limit with these things. The fact that you've got something you can display multiple items in instead of just one. I think we're all used to item frames at this point, but they've been the default for long enough that they now feel kind of restrictive. And I think it's really interesting to have stuff like this. Thinking about the signs that you put up on your like taverns and stuff around West Hill, like maybe you could have little items like that, like little sprites or whatever, that they can be almost like a code to what that thing is without having to employ too much sign text and that kind of thing. I can see them even being like color coded to like various different ideas for base exploration and that kind of stuff, or like a Dewey Decimal System almost for storage. If you're looking for blue, red, blue, then that means you're going to find this or that item. If you're looking, you know, you can use that for a variety of different applications. My brain immediately goes to the way the color coded storage works in like Ender storage and some of the other mods, where you can have an Ender chest with the 3 different colors on it, and you know, just simple stuff like that can lead to interesting ideas for mini games and base design and like guiding players around a space. You can sort of have them follow those things. In the UK countryside, actually, there are different like there are posts by the side of like walking trails for, like, if you're doing the red route, you kind of follow this arrow. If you're doing the yellow route and the green route, you follow that arrow. But the signposts always have like the stripes on them to let you know you're still on the right path. And you can imagine doing something like that in Minecraft, where like if you're following the red trail, make sure that you follow the signs and the shelves that have the red banner in the left-hand slot and so forth. So just like little stuff like that suggests itself to me right now, and I'm sure there's a ton of other use cases for them.
Yeah, I think those are all solid. Like I like the idea of using it for pathing, or for you mentioned shop signage and stuff like that. And I've done that with armor stands. Like I've put a fire resist potion in an armor stand and had it, you know, with the mod, had it float on a hanging sign. Well, I don't have to do that now. Like I could put the way that they place, you'd have to put a block first, but you can have the signs look like they attach via the end as opposed to the back to a building, put 2 back to back, and then just put a fire resist potions in the middle of the sign, or the shelf on both sides, and it would look like an apothecary sign. Like if that's how all of the signage in your town was just a symbol from an item or a block, which is nice, then that I think is really, really cool. The blocks are going to display a little bit different. The blocks do kind of like stick out rather than just kind of sit there like a flat pixel item. But that's something that I played around with at the end of my stream. I was messing around with having a long row of shelves. I used dark oak because I was wanting to have something dark, and then putting a bunch of very bright blocks in them. Redstone blocks, shroom lights, concrete blocks, primary colors, and from a distance, it just reads like a red light, like a track light. You know, so if you had lighting hidden somewhere, you could make it look like, you know, that you've got extra detail. And for someone that's going to be moving on into more modern and sci-fi stuff, like having this level of detail on things, like thinking about putting like these shelves down the edge of a spaceship and then having like bright colored lights all down the edge of it or something like that. It's a really cool idea. And on top of the functionality, like the level of detail that you get into and the combinations are just astronomical. Like you can put any block, like any building block in Minecraft, you can put in one of these shelves. So like you could have gradients. Like you could, if you're trying to work through a block palette, you know, in survival, you could have different options and lay it out in these shelves ahead of time. Like, or to compare and contrast. Like there's all kinds of really fun stuff you could do.
I think the only thing that's missing from them right now is one that looks more like closer to the stone color palette, because I can imagine people wanting to detail like cliff sides and like more natural formations like that, and have like even custom ore blocks almost. Like you could have a couple of like diamond or gold blocks in there to signify that there's a like a vein of some sort of material there without using an ore block, and like you could do some wacky stuff with that, I imagine. But that's not even taking into account the redstone functionality. And this is where I think these really become more than just a decorative feature and start becoming a real game changer, because this is the stuff that I'm the most surprised by. Swapping out your hotbar multiple items at a time is possible with these things. And that even comes down to if you want to have like a shop marquee kind of thing for them where you want to say like sale now on. You could put all of those banners in your hotbar, and if your sign is powered, you can just right-click on it once, and it swaps all of the signage over from what's in your hotbar to what's now on the sign. And obviously now you have a bunch of other scenarios where that's useful. Like if you're building, you want to ditch most or all of your tools to create room for the blocks in your hotbar. You just walk up to this thing and right-click on it. If it's got the blocks you need, it's preloaded with that. It swaps those blocks on the shelves for all of the stuff that's in your inventory. Not only that, but you can do it in segments. You can do it 7 through 9 is the blocks that you want to use, or 4 through 9 is the blocks you want to use, or the entire hotbar swaps out. You know, if you're headed to the Nether, you could swap for a hotbar that's preloaded with fire resistance potions and a gold helmet that you can swap out, that kind of thing. And I think there are even more use cases for it beyond just survival gameplay too. Like if you want to quickly swap loadouts in a mini game, like now you can do that at the click of a button just with some powered shelves in the lobby area of wherever you're starting or respawning or what have you. Even if you want to just clear your hotbar to fill it with other items from a chest somewhere, like just having an empty set of shelves somewhere that you can just walk up and go boop and your entire hotbar is cleared, that's kind of phenomenal. Like it's something that I hadn't considered as a possibility for inventory management in this game. Like we're all thinking about GUI-based solutions with, you know, hotkeys and an additional row of inventory and stuff like that. But having something that's tactile like this that you interact with out there in the world without having to open your inventory is kind of mind-blowing as a concept, and I'm quite surprised that nobody's really pushed this idea before.
I was surprised as well when I went in, and I originally thought, probably again because of the bias of having item frames in the game for so long, that they would just display items. I didn't think they was going to have a whole stack. And so after chatting with the live stream, I was thinking like, you know, having 2 shelves that you would bring with you as part of your like travel everywhere shulker box, you know, the thing that has your bed and a furnace and some torches and stuff like that. So when you lay out all your shulkers like I do at endgame, and you're trying to switch between like, well, I need 6 different kinds of dirt texture for this path, and I need 6 different kinds of green texture for this foliage, and every now and again I have to switch things out, and I want to have stone texture for when I run into doing a cliff. Like it would be nice to set up a temporary shelf where I put like a stack of all the different textures I'm using in my pathing, and when I'm using the different textures for grass and whatnot, and I'm done with them and I need to switch to path, I just walk over to these shelves, click, and have the last 6 slots in my hotbar switch out, because I'm generally going to be keeping the pick, the shovel, and the axe in the first 3. That's where they normally are for me, and then it'll swap out the blocks. And I mean, can I just walk up to my shulker boxes and do that manually? Yes, but all of my items are not all in the same shulker box. So visually, I'm bouncing between 3 and 6 shulker boxes, loading and unloading a stack at a time. And I'm sure visually as a viewer, it's pretty jarring. I'm moving pretty fast because I'm, you know, been playing Minecraft forever, and I know where everything is in these shulker boxes. So I think not only would it be clearer as a player, but also clearer as a viewer for people that make content with Minecraft to walk up to some shelves that are displaying a bunch of green blocks that are obviously grass textures that I'm using, and a bunch of brown blocks that are obviously path textures I'm using, and watch me switch between the 2. And the only trick there is that you'd have to manage the stack size. So like as you get low on dirt or low on coarse dirt, you'd have to replenish that shelf. But it's something that you'd have to do only once in a while, because texturing, you're not necessarily using stacks and stacks of the same thing. Very often you've already done that. You're kind of like swapping out 1 or 2 coarse dirt blocks for a rooted dirt or a brown concrete powder, just little things like that, that a stack is going to last you a long time. And the issue is not volume, it's variety and having to switch to that variety. And I often have to do stages. Like I have to think, okay, I'm going to do in the cliff work that I'm doing, I'm going to have to do the geometry changing, the digging, and the grass. And after that, I'm going to switch to the dirt and the bush blocks and all the different stuff that is like more edge of the river. And I don't usually have all of that in my inventory at the same time because it's just too much and it becomes problematic as you also want to collect things that you're dropping and all that stuff. So having this kind of stuff to switch on site is interesting to me, because at first thought I was like, well, this is meant to be display these items in your base. That's not going to be useful. I don't want to go back to the keep or back to my storage system every time I want to swap these things. But I wasn't thinking that they would be as mobile as they are. And I think that that's interesting. I'm curious to see if there's going to be any additional redstone functionality. I don't imagine you can move these with a piston. I didn't try. I forgot to. I also am very curious if you can put shulker boxes on them. Could you put a shulker box that's full of items on them? I don't know. Because you can put all other blocks on them, right? Like banners, like a couple things that I didn't think would go on them, go on them.
Yeah, I've confirmed that you can put shulker boxes with contents on them, and they stay with contents. Like there's no kind of glitches there. And yeah, as far as pushing them, I think it might be possible on Bedrock Edition because pushable tile entities are already a thing. You can already push chests and stuff around on Bedrock. Whether that's going to be possible on Java when they come to Java, probably not. Although I would love it if they made an exception for this or started the push towards having movable tile entities with this, because mods and so forth have proved that it is possible. I'm pretty sure Nembon's carpet mod did this back in the day. And the problem with it is that if you start being able to push things like furnaces and dispensers and stuff like that, it breaks flying machines. There's implications for other redstone contraptions where there are already those in use as unpushable blocks. But obviously, if you want to have pushable tile entities in Java Edition, it seems like it would be possible, and it'd just be a matter of letting the community know that that change was in the works and was on the way. So this could be a great herald of that change, if you like. One of the things I considered the sort of stumbling block, at least for me, is that you were saying you normally have like your tools on 1, 2, 3. I start with torches on 1, pickaxe on 2, sword on 3, and then I have bow, axe, shovel. So the last 3 slots of my inventory, there's usually like, fireworks, water bucket, food, that kind of stuff. Normally, if I have blocks, I put them on 7 and 8. And my thinking was, well, it's a bit of a shame that I have to do 7, 8, 9 when I just swap with one shelf, or that I'm going to, if I want to swap my entire hotbar over, I can't leave slots 1 and 2 and then slot 9 to make sure that I always have torches, a pickaxe, and some food on me. Then I realized that what you do, the way you get around that, is you make sure that there are torches, a clone of your pickaxe, an identically enchanted pickaxe, and food on the shelf. And then all of the, blocks in between can be changed. But you always keep that set of tools. It's just you're rotating a different tool into your hand that probably has the same functionality. So you can preserve elements of your hotbar. I've seen people suggest maybe like it fills it from wherever the cursor is, like whatever hotbar slot you have selected, it just changes it from there and it wraps around. I don't think it needs to be that complex. I think there are like player ways of making sure that you have that stuff still in your inventory, and it's to put the stuff in those slots on the shelves. And then that reduces the amount of confusion that players might have if they did have the middle slot of their hotbar selected arbitrarily, and then suddenly all of the items have come into their inventory in completely different orientations. So I think there's some neat ways of getting around the functionality of that and making it what you want. That said, I still think there's room for improvement. I still think there's a couple of ways that I would like to see them change. Like, I'm curious if the shelves could be filled from hoppers. And that way, if you've got a stack of something that's already in there, but it's like, you've got 2 or 3 andesite left that you're putting back in there so you can grab your other set of tools. If there was a hopper linked to a chest behind that could then refill that stack of andesite, if you're always keeping it in the same slot of your inventory, then that means you could just go back there once all of that was filled up and then refresh all of the blocks that you're using to build. Likewise, if hoppers could pull items out of shelves, you could drop off your hotbar easily and maybe have the items show up on a shelf elsewhere so that they're ready for you to like click on as you walk out your front door to go and do something, but you have your hotbar free to change up, move around anything that you're working with in your base environment. And that once again means fewer interactions where you have to open your inventory. Then let's say, for example, we get a hotkey that cycles the rows of player inventory into the hotbar. So it swaps your hotbar for row 1 of your inventory, and then row 2, and then row 3, and then it cycles back around. With 4 clicks, you could deposit your entire player inventory onto shelves. Because then you'd just be cycling through to the next one, clicking on the next set of powered shelves, and it would just unpack your entire inventory. And then it could go into hoppers. And then you see the sort of cascading ideas, the sort of pie in the sky notion of where this could go. I think it could be revelatory for inventory in a way that it's already scratching the surface of. I feel like if they added one extra layer of functionality to this, I think the implications for the game could be pretty tremendous.
Yeah, being able to move 9 slots of inventory into the shelving with one click is pretty revolutionary in terms of speed. It doesn't seem like it at first on paper, but when you actually experience it in game, you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute. This really takes a lot of like clicking and dragging or shift clicking out of my life when I'm switching blocks around. And I like the idea of the hotbar rotation, like going from like levels of your inventory, like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, because then you could actually have a physical representation on the wall of your base of your entire inventory. You know, like you get your hotbar and then your other slots, all of which would be reachable from the ground. Mm-hmm. Like it wouldn't be a big ask, you know, to have to like jump and move around and manipulate that kind of stuff. The only thing about the hoppers though that I'd be curious about is that if you've got 3 different items in the shelf, if that first item fills up, then your hopper is going to be jammed, right? Like if you've got more than a stack of andesite in that hopper and then a stack of the other 2 items, until that hopper empties all the andesite, the other items are not going to like filter in because they're not going to have a place to go. Because I'm assuming that they would fill the shelf left to right. That's how most inventory works.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's what I would imagine. But like, yeah, if you already have blocks in place there, then maybe like it could fill up the stack of andesite, realize that there's no more andesite, there's no more room for it, and then it would go on to topping up the granite stack. In the same way that if you have a couple of hoppers like directed down into each other, then it's going to add to stacks that are already in whatever the storage system is without starting a new stack. Which the Copper Golem currently does, I think. So yeah, there's a few different approaches already modeled in the game right now, and I think it would be interesting if there was some sort of functionality there. It might be difficult considering that I don't think you can fill stuff like item frames from a hopper. Like, it's not going to just deposit the item out there in the world. But that's why I think if there are already kind of guide items placed in there and it's just topping up a stack that you've already started, that maybe could be some interesting hopper functionality. Thinking about like even removing items from the shelves, that wouldn't even need to be done by hoppers if projectiles work the same way as they do with item frames. And this is something that I didn't test, but if you're able to shoot the shelf to get the items off of it, then potentially you could do that with, other projectiles. You could do it with snowballs and that kind of thing, and then have those produced automatically so that your shelves could be unloaded into some hoppers that are waiting at the bottom of the shelf, maybe, and then you could have that completely flushed into an item sorting system or something like that. And going back to what we were saying earlier about like whether you could wax signs or not, maybe you wax a shelf and the items can't be removed by projectiles, so there's less of a chance of it being griefed by a random skeleton wandering past or players just kind of shooting signage off of your shops or something like that. But I think there's again a layer of functionality could be added to these that would make them absolutely tremendous, and I could see players doing a whole lot with them if there was a bit more functionality from the redstone side of things or from a player interactivity tactile side of things. They're fantastic already. I think they're going to revolutionize the way people decorate. I think they're going to maybe even revolutionize the way some people manage their hotbar in their inventory, but I'm curious to see if they can take it one step further.
There are thousands of combinations when I think about decorating with them in terms of the blocks you can put in them, and combination of the color of the shelf and the color of the block. Like, it's just astronomical, the different stuff that you could do. And at the risk of sounding greedy, when I think about that kind of thing, I kind of wish you could put them flat on the ground. Like, I know that we already have slabs and we already have trapdoors, and these are the vertical slabs everybody's been wanting for. But it would be interesting if you could put them on the ground from a decoration standpoint, and then be able to have items be on the ground in the same way that you can put an item frame on a flat surface, horizontally, and put something in it. So that could be fun too. But it just, I do find the placement of them a little bit tricky. I was placing them around, and very often, because I was clicking quite quickly, instead of placing the next shelf, I would place a shelf in a shelf. So I'd have like meta shelf.
Yeah.
And so I had to like destroy the thing. And I found that when I was building with them, I would end up destroying it rather than taking the item off of it. It was like, it was weird, kind of a new skill to learn, like when you're building with them, that you can quite quickly end up putting things in them that you don't intend. But what's nice about them is from the back, you don't have to shift click. So you can only put an item in them from the front. So if you're placing things up against them on the back, like another shelf, you can just go right along and place them together like that. And I like that you can do that in the same way that it's really fun to put like trapdoors back to back and get that kind of interesting like 6 pixel wide thing. In this case, it's 10 pixels because the shelf itself at its widest point is 5 pixels. And then I think it's at its thinnest point, it's 3. And so they work really well with their perspective trapdoors, and I'm really curious to see what people can do. It's going to depend on the context of your build, like are you building more medieval or modern or whatever. But I'm curious about the color that you can add to them, because it almost gives like another level of mini block that you like. I mean, I am spoiled because I have the data pack, but you can display blocks now quite close together. And in sequence with these, which I think is going to be really, really fun.
Yeah, there's so much potential to them, and I'm sure we'll continue to discuss them as they pop up in Java Edition, hopefully very soon. And by next week, I imagine people will have cracked these things wide open, and we'll have even more use cases for them. So if you have any more interesting insight into shelves, please consider writing into the show. It's always great to get some listener email and have more stuff to discuss and follow up on topics like this in future episodes. For now, though, we're going to wrap up this episode here. So thank you so much for listening to The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. We also have monthly hangouts and even quarterly hangouts where you get to learn the behind-the-scenes facts and figures of the podcast. We currently have 275 patrons, so we would love to add to that number. There's always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are published on Mondays on your favorite podcasting platforms. If you wouldn't mind, go out and leave us a review on those platforms. It's one of the best ways to kind of bump us up in terms of discoverability, and it's also free to do that. So if you like the show, leave a review. We would very much appreciate it. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by PixelRiffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/PixelRiffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I'm going to point everyone to the Citadel Cafe podcast, my other show about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I recorded a new episode on Saturday with Steven. We had gone to see the new Superman film by James Gunn, and we did our full review. The entire episode is just about Superman. So if you're curious about that, then check that out. It should be published in the next couple of days. I am Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find, and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Tuesday through Saturday, often at 10 a.m., except for Saturday. Saturday is still a 1 p.m. show, but during the week, it's 10 a.m. now for the summer over on twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but we'll shelve that for now.